Hello, thank you for joining us for the next of the ESHA webinars. This one is going to be the Genesis Tips for Success. A little information about ESHA research. ESHA was established in 1981 with the goal of providing a comprehensive nutrition database with very few missing values. Our solutions include today the Genesis food formulation and labeling software, restaurant menu analysis and labeling software, which is also Genesis Food, the Genesis supplements application for supplement formulation, nutrition and diet analysis software, the food processor, and we also have consulting services. Genesis R&D Food, which is what we'll be taking a look at today, was released in 1991. We include the 1990 and 2016 labeling formats and regulations. It's really designed for product development, menu analysis, nutrient analysis, reporting, audits. We have labeling for the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Europe. And labeling compliance parts for allergen statements, ingredient statements, and nutrient content claims. We have a couple upcoming webinars after today. On July 11th, we're going to have a Genesis R&D Supplements version 1.2 overview. It's going to be an overview of all the changes that were made with the 1.2 version of Genesis Supplements. And then on July 18th, the next week, we're going to have the top user tips for success part 2. So that one's going to be a little bit more on the functionality and ingredient and recipe side of things. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded. All of the webinars that we have done over the past couple of years are available on our website and on YouTube. If you have any questions, please submit those to the GoToWebinar control panel that you have on your screen. Today's agenda, like I mentioned before, is going to be mostly on the technical side of things. Not going to read too much through this list here because we'll go through those in a couple of minutes, but mostly on the technical side of things, versioning of your software, decimal places, preferences, things like that. And then part 2 on July 18th, again, will be more on the ingredient and recipe side of things, things like how to add your ingredients, batching recipes, reports, and labeling. My name is Ben, I didn't mention that before, and I'm joined by my colleague Alicia, and she's going to ask all the questions today, and I'll go through all of those answers inside of the Genesis software.
Thanks, Ben. I'm happy to join you today. So yes, today we'll cover some of the more frequently asked questions that our support teams receive. Whether you're new to Genesis or experienced users, we hope you'll discover some helpful features and settings today. So we'll get into the questions. Question number 1. How do I know if I have the current version of Genesis installed?
Great. I'm going to take a look in the Genesis application first, and I'll show you where to find that. And then I have a screenshot of that information. I don't want to show off my username and serial code, but inside of the Genesis application, when you first open it, you'll have the Home tab open, or if you have a recipe open, you simply click on Home, and then click on the About button, and that will bring open this window, the About Genesis screen. In this screen, you'll see a lot of information about your application, your server, your account, and all that sort of stuff. So the very top line is going to show you the actual version of the software that you currently have installed, and the database structure. So this is the version of the database. They are different version numbers, so you'll want to make sure you have the newest of both. You also will have the server name that you're connected to here, either that's on your local computer or if it's a server that your company owns. And then the catalog is the name of the database. That rarely changes. Usually it's just going to be Gen Data, but occasionally your IT team may change that. Then you have your customer number and your serial code. Customer number is the account number that you have, and your serial code is the 32-digit number to activate your software. And then the next line is going to be some information about your serial code. It'll say the number of computers that your serial code has been activated on and the number of activations you have remaining. So every time you install the software on a computer, it'll use one of those activations and it'll say the total you have remaining. The next line, depending on if you have the installed version of the software or the cloud, will be a little bit different. If you have the installed version of the software, then it'll say your priority support, either a date or hasn't been purchased. I think for most people right now, it'll say it hasn't been purchased just because our technical team is still working on getting that updated. So you may see it hasn't been purchased even though it has. If you have any questions about that, you can give our processing or sales team a call, and we can answer those questions for you of if your support is current or not. For the cloud application, it'll say your subscription end date. So it'll say your subscription is good through June 30th or whatever date you've got there. And then the very last line is how many concurrent licenses you have, so how many people can use the software at a time. Again, if you have any questions about any of that, contact Esha's sales team and we can answer any questions that you do have.
Thank you. And then while we're talking about versions, can you just speak a little bit about how many updates or the update schedule that folks should expect?
Absolutely. Generally, we update about twice per year, so you get 2 major updates per year.
Thank you. So question number 2, how do I select the number of decimal places I need to see on screen display and on reports?
Great. So we have 2 different places to show decimal places. You have the preferences that will control how many decimal places are shown in your reports, and then you'll also have the decimal places that are shown in the nutrient section of an ingredient or a recipe. So I'll open up a recipe that I've got so we can take a look at both of those different places. So if we go into Edit Recipe and then to the Nutrients tab, if you want to change the number of decimal places that are shown in this window here, that's actually within this window. You have the decimal places box at the bottom of this window, and you can just scroll through this. Decimal places in both counts, this place and in preferences, can go anywhere from 0 decimal places if you just want whole numbers, all the way up to 6 decimal places. And if you're wanting to change it more from a reporting standpoint, so if we take a look at maybe our multi-column report, slide that out of the way there. Our multi-column report currently is showing 2 decimal places. That's going to be controlled in the preferences of the software. So if you go to Home and Preferences, under the General tab, we have a decimal places area here. And again, you can scroll anywhere from 0 to 6 decimal places. We want to say, for example, 3 decimal places here. Just change it to 3, hit OK, and our report will automatically update to show that number of decimal places.
Great. So question number 3, we sometimes see label display report or the multi-column report on manufacturers' websites that sport the Esha logo and contact information. We also see this sometimes on data sheets that customers receive. So how do users change the contact information and the logo from Esha's default in the software to their own?
Perfect. That's a little bit more of a complicated answer there. We've got a few different places you can do that. So there are 3 different styles of reports inside of Genesis. We have the view label report, also called the label display. That's going to have its own specific header and footer image that you can enter in. And then we also have, if we click on the reports tab here, let me close these out so it's a little bit less confusing. If we go into the reports area here, we have the 2 different distinct kind of styles of icons for our reports. We have the built-in reports for the application, then we have our blue icon reports or reports plus. Both of these are going to have different places where we can enter in our own header image. For all 3 of these situations, it's all done within the preferences of the software though. So if you go to Home and Preferences again, we have 3 different places again. So we have the label, which is going to be the view label or label display. In that place, we're going to go into the header/footer area. And for the label display, we can do 2 separate images. So you can do a image for the header and an image for the footer. And those are going to be floating images. So if I hit OK and we go back into our label display, or view label, I currently have my header image at the very top, but again, I can move that around as I need. So you have a lot of control over where that's located, how it's positioned, size, that sort of stuff. Moving over to our other report styles, if we go into our multi-column report, that one won't show the actual header image in the software. It'll only show it when you print it to PDF. But again, it's in the preferences. So go to Home and Preferences. That's under just reports. So click on the reports tab. And then we can go into, we have our header footer area here, and we can expand the header and footer. The header will have its own image, so you can put in an image, but you can also put in some text as well. So if you want to type in something that's not necessarily an actual image of a header, you could do that too, or you can do both. And then the footer is just text. So you can't do an image as a footer for these reports, but you can type in some text here. And then the very last area, which you will see the header image on for these reports, are the blue icon reports, or the reports plus. So we take a look at our label display standard 1. It opens a little bit differently. And this one shows, by default, this one will have a header. The standard reports won't have an image directly tied to them by default when you first install the software. The Reports Plus will, so they show the ESHA header. If you'd like to change that, again, Home Preferences, and under Reports Plus, we have the Show Header Image area. You can check or uncheck the box to simply completely hide the header image, or you can change the file that you're pointing to as an image right here. And you can change the location of the image as well. So you have a lot of control over size of image, location, stuff like that.
Great, thank you. And question number 4, how do I delete an ingredient or recipe from Genesis?
Certainly a question that we get a lot. I know it's a little bit more of a cautionary tale type question. There's a lot of concern there. To just go in to delete an item, it's under the database tab in Genesis. You go to database, and then there's a delete area, and delete will allow you to select the different type of item you would like to delete. So you're going to delete a recipe, click on recipe. You can't delete recipes and ingredients at the exact same time. Partially because you do want to make sure if there's an ingredient that is a part of a recipe, you'll have to either remove that ingredient from the recipes or delete those recipes before you can actually delete that ingredient. So if there's something that relies on that ingredient, it can't just be deleted without question. And then also make sure Genesis does not have a recycle bin. It doesn't have an undo button. If I go in and delete this recipe, it's gone. There's no way to get it back. So make sure that you've got, if you have to get approval for items, or if you want to check with a coworker that maybe created the recipe or ingredient, just make sure you know what you're doing before you do it. Don't go in and just delete with reckless abandon. For the installed software, there's really no way to get it back. For our cloud application, we do have backups of the databases that are taken every night. So it may be possible to retrieve the recipes, but it's not something, again, not like a recycle bin where you can just go in and grab it. It requires work from our technical support team. It can take a couple of days to get that information back. So it's not fast, but it's technically possible to get it back at least.
Thank you, some good information there. All right, question number 5. How do I show more or less nutrients and create custom sets of nutrients in Genesis?
Great, and that's going to be under our nutrients to view. It's a term you'll probably hear a lot if you talk to technical support or nutrition. Nutrients to view is going to control the nutrients that are shown in the application, anywhere from the nutrients tab in the edit recipe or ingredient into all of our reports as well. So it really drives what nutrients are shown in all aspects of the application. The nutrients to view area is found under the home tab. So you go to home and nutrients to view. You see there's a big list here that we've already got pre-populated. This list is going to be the different pre-built sets of nutrients that come built into Genesis. So you've got the label, US label, mandatory, and all nutrients if you want to see just the nutrients that are mandatory on a US label, or the mandatory plus voluntary nutrients. That would be for, this one says 2016, so the new regulations, or the one without a year is the 1990, it's the old regulations. Same with Canada, you've got 2016 and the older ones, and EU. And then past that, you got things like glycemic index and exchanges and fats, things like that. We've got a few different pre-built sets that we find to be useful and helpful. The default in Genesis when you first install the software is going to be this Genesis SQL one. It has about 40 nutrients that are just kind of the more commonly used nutrients. So it's not necessarily a country-specific set of nutrients. It's a little more broad scope. If you don't want to use one of our pre-built sets, you certainly don't have to. To do your own set, you simply go into this modify area in the top option here. That'll open up a window that will show you all of the nutrients that are currently shown. And if you want to adjust that set, click on edit. And now in this case, you have the two different sets of nutrients here. The far left side is going to be all of the nutrients that are currently not shown in your report. So we won't see glucose and fructose in our report currently because it's in the far left side. And then the right side are the nutrients that are currently selected. So if we wanted to take this existing set of nutrients and maybe add water to it, if I can find water here, probably one of the more common ones you'd want to add into our set of nutrients. I'll add cost because it's the first one I found. Add in cost to our nutrients and click OK. We come to another part that's a commonly asked question. If you have a pre-built nutrient set selected and you click on save, most likely it's going to give you an error that says you don't have permission to do that. That's because of where the file is saved on your actual computer. We do that for a reason. We don't want you to save over those pre-built sets, because if you do, then it's not going to be the US mandatory nutrients anymore. It's a different set now. So if you want to create your own set that's your own, click on the Save As option. Save As will then give you the option to save it. The default location that it opens up is going to be the place that we want to save all of those nutrient files. So I'll just say new webinar nutrient set and hit save, and we hit OK. Now the one nice thing about that is, so long as you save it in that folder, so long as you don't change where that's being saved, it will show up in this drop-down menu as well. So you can expand this list to whatever you want. If you've got your US label mandatory plus water, or if you've got Canada mandatory plus water, you got a few different ones you want to add in, plus ash, something like that. You can create your own sets and have an expansive list of your own specific sets that you would like to use.
Thanks. Just on a personal note, one of the sets that I've created as we're transitioning from old to new labels is the mandatory 2016 label set, but then also including especially total dietary fiber, because I want to see what was reported for fiber and what may or may not be reported yet for the dietary fiber 2016. So it's very helpful to create those custom sets based on what you're working on. Thanks. So question number 6. Users want to know how to organize, categorize, or tag their files for different projects or stages of a recipe, etc. Can you describe how groups can be used to accomplish that?
Absolutely. So groups are certainly probably one of the more commonly maybe not utilized pieces of Genesis, especially when first starting to use the software. And we certainly try to point that out because it's a very helpful thing to get started with when you first start using the software. But groups, if you'd like to add your own groups, it's in the database tab. So I'll go through that first, and then we'll take a look at some of the more common ways you can use groups. So under the database tab, you can click on modify. This will allow you to modify the database for things like nutrients and HACCP guidelines and groups and allergens. So we have our groups tab that we can go into, and that's going to show us all of the groups that we currently have in the database. You'll see a lot of these are pre-populated, so the ones that are written with black writing are going to be pre-built into the Genesis database. So you'll have the baked ingredients and candy groups pre-built into the database. They're not ones you can remove. They're built in and hard-coded in. And then you can create your own as well. So we see the ones that are written in blue here are ones that I have personally created for my database. You can create as well. And then we also have the characteristics. So dairy-free, gluten-free, kosher, organic, vegan, vegetarian. Great way to utilize groups just by different characteristics of your foods. Most of the foods that we provide in our database are organized based on those characteristics. And if you want to add in your own characteristics, you can do that as well. But a few kind of case examples of how to utilize database groups really well. Different label claims. You can have a group that is low protein or light sodium, things like that. So you can categorize those items very easily, especially if you're looking at ingredients. If you have an ingredient that's specifically low in sodium that you want to use for recipes that are low in sodium, it's a great way to add those items in to find them really easily. Different stages of development is a way that we've seen it groups used a lot. So we see I have a folder named stages of development. If I expand that out, I've got a in production, in development, waiting for QA, and retired groups. We can determine where this recipe is in the development life cycle based on what group it's in. So we can put it in waiting for QA. If we've finished developing this recipe and we're waiting for our QA person to go in and take a look at the recipe and confirm it. You can also use a retired or no longer in use for ingredients or recipes. You're no longer purchasing an ingredient from a supplier. And then inside of the preferences, I'll open that really quick so we can take a look at it. Inside of the preferences, go to home preferences again, we have groups to exclude. And groups to exclude will piggyback on the existing groups that we have in our database. And any groups that are checked off in this area will not be found in any searches. So if we go to search for an ingredient in our recipe and that ingredient is in this retired group, now that it's checked off in groups to exclude, those ingredients won't appear in our searches. So it's a great way to, you don't have to worry about deleting your ingredients or deleting your recipes to not have them show up in your searches. So you still have a paper trail, you still have documentation that this ingredient existed, what it was, how it was used, but you don't have to worry about it clogging your searches. A few other great ways to be able to use groups as we go back into our creating groups area here. Kind of depending on what sort of company you are as well. If you're an ingredient supplier, you can create a folder for all the companies that you sell products to, and then make a group for every single company. That way, if you've got a company that you're supplying ingredients for, that you supply a specific 15 ingredients to, you can group all those items up into a single group, and then you can export all those items all at one time. You can use ESHAport to select a specific group to export data out using ESHAport. So there's a lot of ways to be able to group information together using these groups. Again, if you're a consultant, kind of same idea. You can create a folder for all the companies that you consult for and create groups for each individual company. That way you have the ingredients and recipes that that company has that you're creating for them. That way you're not using an ingredient for company B that is actually being used by company A. So great way to organize things and separate things out. And then finally with groups, if you have the Genesis API, groups are really a mandatory piece of the API. There is a publish button here. Any group that is published, the Genesis API can pull information from. If a group isn't published, then none of that information can be pulled out. Or if you have a recipe that's not in any groups at all, then the Genesis API has no way to pull that out. So again, kind of grouping these ideas together, you can take the stages of development area and the publish area. That way your in production group is always published. So the Genesis API can pull that information out. Or if you're using something like ESHAport, where you're scheduling an export every night to be able to pull that data out, put that item into that group. That way, if an item gets put into that group, it's automatically pulled the next time either the API or ESHAport pulls that information out.
Thank you. Great explanation of that. And this one's a two-part question. Question number 7, does Genesis export the label as a vector file? And how can I export the label?
Absolutely. So we've got a few different ways you can export the label out, not necessarily just as a vector or just as an image file. We'll go through all those different options here. So no matter how you want to export the label out, you'll want to go into the view label or label display area. That will give us the nutrition label, ingredient statement, allergen statement, really all the things that we generally want to export out at the same time for our back of package type information. If you want to export the label just as an image by itself, you can right click on the image of the label inside of Genesis, and select export as image. Then you can either save it as a file, as a JPEG or a bitmap or a GIF or a TIFF, all those sorts of files, or you can export it to your clipboard, and then you can paste it into Word or Excel or really wherever you want to export or to paste it out if you want to paste it into Adobe Illustrator to then manipulate it from there. Or as Alicia mentioned, if you're wanting to export it as a vector file to be able to manipulate that inside of something like Adobe Illustrator. If you right click inside of your label display, you'll have this option for print as vector. One thing to note, it does matter where we click inside of this report. So if I right click on the label itself and select print as vector, the only thing that's going to export into that vector file is the image or the label itself. So the ingredient statement, the allergen statement, all this other information that's in this report won't be exported out. If you want all of that information all at the same time, if you right click into the background of the report, so you don't make sure you don't select any of the actual fields here and select print as vector, it will then allow you to export. It'll export all of that information all at the same time. So I'll take all of that. And then one other way to export the label, Eshaport does have the ability to export labels as well. So with Eshaport, you can select a group if you would like to. So if you've got a group of recipes that are maybe your in-production recipes, you can have Eshaport select whatever you'd like to, and then export all of the images of all of those recipes all at one time into a single folder. So you can really export labels in bulk instead of just one at a time.
Thank you. And the last question we have on our agenda is question number 8. How do I export reports in Genesis in general?
Great. We've got a few different ways to do that as well. I'll go ahead and open up our multi-column report so we can take a look at a few ways to export individual reports. And then we'll take a look at there is a way to export multiple reports at the same time as well. So if you're wanting to export a single report, we've got our multi-column report here. We want to export it into a PDF file. To do that, you simply go into File and then Print to PDF, and it will create this multi-column report as a PDF file. If we wanted to export it into Excel or put it into our clipboard, you right-click into the report itself, and then we have the option to export report either to File, which will be a text file, or to clipboard. So if you select export report to clipboard, open up Excel, and then paste in, it will put all that information into Excel, really kind of getting rid of the formatting of it, so the coloring and that sort of stuff, and pushes it just right into Excel. And then if you wanted to do multiple reports at the same time, that is possible as well. What you want to do then is go into the actual recipe screen. So you don't want to have a current report selected. You want to have the recipe selected. So close your reports, go to just the recipe itself, and then the same instructions apply. File, print to PDF, but in this case, instead of being a single report that's selecting, once we get to the print area that we see here, in the bottom area, it'll say select report sections that you would like to print. So if we select, say, the food list, that'll show this exact information here, the ingredients we've entered into our recipe. And as we go down, preparation method, audit trails, ingredient statement, label display, spreadsheet report. So we can select whichever pieces we really want to. If we want, say, the multi-column report and our ingredient statement, I'll go ahead and hit print preview just so we can take a look at how that comes up. Now we've got our recipe information, ingredient information, nutrients. As we go across to our next pages, we got more information, multi-column report, ingredient statement, things like that. So you really get to control exactly what information is in this single report. So you can really group it together into one big report. Or if you don't want it to be a PDF, if you wanted to export it to, say, Excel or a text file, that's going to be under, let me go back to recipe, it's going to be under the reports tab. So a little bit confusing way to get there, but you'll want to go inside of the recipe, then click on reports, and then we have the export as text option. Click on that and it'll ask you to export it to file. Kind of same idea here. So you'll see the different report sections that are optioned here, so you can export them here. So you can select Again, food list or nutrients or all the different pieces here. And then you can select where to export it to, either to a single text file or into your clipboard. If you uncheck the single text file and check clipboard, it's actually not going to save this file here, so it's not going to save anything here. And then we can hit save. And then if we open up Excel and hit paste, it'll just paste all of that information that we selected, the food list, the spreadsheet report, all of that information, all into Excel at the same time.
Thanks so much. So many options, and that's helpful information. So those are all the questions we have on our agenda. We have several that have come in, and we'll address those.
All right, before we get to those questions, if you would like some additional training, we have some professional and advanced Genesis workshops coming up. I know that I feel like I need some more training at this point. We have our Genesis professional training coming up in Lombard, Illinois on July 18th and 19th. That'll be a introductory type course. On August 15th and 16th in Washington, D.C., we're going to have a professional training with menu labeling. So that's going to be more on the restaurant side of things and grocery store side of things. September 19th and 20th, again in Illinois, we'll have an advanced Genesis workshop. So that's more of the advanced type topics, new labeling regulations, due diligence, PBCAS, things like that. And then on November 1st, and that doesn't seem right. That's 2 full months of training. We're going to have an advanced Genesis workshop. We'll specify the date, November 30th and December 1st, so the dates there. In Toronto, that's going to be a Canada-specific training, so we're going to go over the new Canadian regulations there. Sorry about the missed dates there. If you have any questions about training, cost, availability, or if you want to go ahead and get yourself into one of those classes, you can call our training number, or you can email training@esha.com. We're going to go into questions now. Before we do that, if you have any questions that we didn't get to, you can give us a call. Our phone number is here. You can email either our sales team if you have questions about your account or your support, things like that. Or if you have actual technical support type questions, you can email support@esha.com. We have a lot of useful information as well on our website. You can join our LinkedIn page. You can view our blog on our website. We're going to have a lot of useful links in the follow-up email that we send out after this webinar to our blog, to our knowledge base, to our manual, the old webinars that we've done before, which of course we hit a lot of these topics, things like groups and ESHAport in a lot more detail in those longer webinars. So we'll have a lot of information for you coming up later today. But we'll go ahead and get into some of these questions that we had from people right now.
Thank you so much for addressing all of these, and here are a few more.
Question number 1, if you delete an ingredient, you get a warning or a list of the recipes the ingredient is used in. You do get a list of recipes the ingredient is in. It won't actually delete the ingredient if it's used in any recipes. So if you try to delete an ingredient and it's used in any recipes, it'll say you'll have to replace this ingredient or remove it from this list of recipes before you can actually delete that ingredient. So yes, that is the case. Another question, are groups for ingredients only, or can they be used for recipes? Certainly used for both. You can use the same group to put ingredients and or recipes in. So if you have a group that is retired, you can put 50 ingredients and 50 recipes into that single one group. Next question, are preferences, things like groups to exclude, saved per user, or are they global? What about nutrients to view? Preferences are going to be per user, so they are user specific. If you check a box for groups to exclude for one user, the other user will not have that excluded unless they select it. Same with things like header image, things like that. So all of that is very user specific. Nutrients to view is generally computer specific, so it's a little bit different. If you have the cloud application, again, preferences will be user specific, so each login will have their own. Nutrients to view will actually be account-wide because you're connecting to the same computer because it's on the cloud. For an installed software, nutrients to view are computer specific. So if you share a computer with somebody, the nutrients to view would be shared. But if you have your own computer that you each access Genesis from, nutrients to view would be separate. And you can share those files. So If you create a custom set of nutrients and you just want to share that with one of your colleagues, it is possible to do that. And you can ask our technical support team for more information on actually how to do that. All right, and we have one last question. Can you show how to add recipes and ingredients to groups, and then how to search for them? Absolutely. Let me get back over into Genesis and we'll take a look there. So inside of our recipe here, we've now got our recipe that I've created. If I want to add that recipe to a group, I just go to the Edit Recipe area and Groups. And this has kind of the same list as like Groups to Exclude did, and just check boxes next to them. So if this recipe is currently waiting for QA, just check the box for waiting for QA, hit OK. And now this item is in, you'll even see here it says Groups waiting for QA, that it's in that group currently. And then I'll go ahead and save this recipe. Okay. And now if I'd like to search for a specific recipe that's in a group or an ingredient, if we want to open a recipe that's in a specific group, go to Home, Open Recipe. You have the More button here you can click. And you can then either search based on name, a lot of different ways you can search here, or you can select by group. So if I click Select, waiting for QA, OK, and search, it should just come up with that one recipe that I'd created before. While adding ingredients to a recipe, basically the same idea, but I'll show that as well. I'll open up this recipe and we'll then take a look at how to search for specific ingredients. Again, you have your search for box, you have the More button, so it's still the More button. And now you've got a search for. So if we want to search for milk, that is probably not in the waiting for QA because it's a group I just created, but maybe that is in beverages, which obviously all milk should probably be in beverages, but we can search based on, we'll search for almond. Search in beverages for almonds, we find a couple hundred results that are really all just almond milk. So you get a result for just that one search and that are just in that one group. And then one last question we've got here that I should have mentioned, but I did not. Can recipes be added to more than one group? Absolutely. Groups are really more like tagging than it is like folders. Folder on a computer, a file has to be in one folder and it can only be in one folder. But in tagging, you can really check off as many boxes as you would like. So if this item is an ingredient that contains fiber that's under review and it's waiting for QA and it's say a candy, it can be in any of those groups, as many as you would like. And it also is maybe a kosher item. We can check off as many groups as we would like. And then when searching, you can search. Let's go back over there. We weren't going to go into too much of searching, but that's okay. I'll do a little bit of bonus here. When searching for items that are in groups, if you select multiple groups to search in, if you're looking for breakfast foods and beverages, you can either include all the groups, so it has to be in it has to be in beverages and in breakfast foods, or you can do an or search, include it in any group, which means if an ingredient is in beverages or it's in breakfast foods, or it's in both. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in all of the groups you select. So that's kind of the difference between those two styles of either it has to be in all the groups you select or it is in at least one of the groups you select.
Ben, there was just one other question that came in for new users to Genesis, are there other resources? So talking about the webinars, the Jumpstart training, and other resources on the ESHA website.
Absolutely. We have the existing webinars. I think we have about 30 or close to it now, different webinars that you can view on our website. And again, we'll send out links for all of this after this webinar with the recording of it. We have all of our existing webinars. We have blog posts that our marketing team is writing all the time, anywhere from updating the different versions of the application that are released to information about added sugars or the definition of what fiber is now for 2016. So it goes anywhere from really Genesis specific information to regulatory specific information, really spanning all of that. We try to have as much information as we can, not just about our software, but about the information that you're going to need. And then we have our knowledge base that has a lot of really frequently asked questions. The knowledge base is generally a lot more from a technical perspective. There's a lot of stuff about errors that you might occur that have been fixed, or information on if preferences get messed up, or ways to change those sorts of things. So again, a lot more technical installation server type standpoint.
Thanks so much. Thanks for covering all this material today.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, we'll have a copy of this sent out very soon, and everyone have a great day.